Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Dr. Thomason, roll call, please.
President Kaler, members of the board, we do have all 5 board members present, one telephonically. Mr. Witovich is here by phone, and the other 4 members are present live.
Thank you very much. And just so Mr. Witovich knows, I may ask for your vote separately just so we can hear you perfectly through the telephone, okay? And right now we're going to have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I move that we approve agenda for today. A second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Mr. Witovich?
Witovich in favor of agenda, approving the agenda? Aye.
Aye, thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Dr. Thomason, Superintendent's report of upcoming events. If there
President
are
Kaler,
any.
normally this is an extremely exciting time of the year with a lot of ceremonies and things happening in our district, but unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 situation, we do have a limited agenda of upcoming events. We do want to recognize our teachers. Coming up next week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and that's May 4th to May 8th, and we have some things happening in the district that'll celebrate some of our teachers on social media and virtually from that aspect. Our next board meeting, it was going to be Wednesday, May 13th. That'll be here in the governing boardroom. And then we do have the scheduled graduations for Higley High School and Williamsfield High School on Thursday, May 21st. And at this time, I would like to just give us a little update from Dr. Foley on what we've been doing and working hard on for some possibilities for the graduation. We're not sure exactly where we're going at this time, but we do have plans for lots of different situations. So I'm going to ask Dr. Foley to give us an update on that. Dr. Foley.
Thank you. With those decisions right now. And so, first of all, I want to start with the fact that, first of all, our administrators, our administrative team, all of our administrative team have been part of, let's put it this way, the number of teams, electronic meetings, and phone calls that have happened over this are hours and hours and hours. That have gone into plans that continue to evolve and continue to change. So again, our high school administrator team, and then we've kind of gotten down to targeted teams working on different tasks, which I'll explain here in a minute. So the high school administrators, Dr. Thomason, we've had some teachers, we've had some instructional coaches, we've had Matt Markling, who's our equipment manager at Williamsfield. I'll talk with you about his role and part here in just a second. We've had HCPA staff, John Percival and Robert Zucker, myself, who have been representing groups. Now keep in mind, our administrators have been talking with student groups. We have been talking with our colleagues across the East Valley on a frequent, ongoing, nonstop basis. In fact, we'll talk about the one district who's actually put something out that came out this last Friday so that we can talk about how this is evolving. But again, you need to know that this is in addition to the world of all-consuming remote learning, this has been the all-consuming conversation, and here are our plans. So obviously, Plan A is, here's one thing that our group decided from the very get-go was that there will be something we do on that day, on that same time. Obviously, ideally, we would want to hold graduations the way we've always held them. As a group, quite honestly, and then we were throwing all kinds of ideas on the wall, you almost have to grieve the fact that this is the reality we're dealing with, and how do we honor and celebrate our class of 2020 the best way we can, knowing that all the options we've thrown out there, some of them aren't reasonable, feasible, safe, and are hard to replicate the experience. They don't replace the experience. And I truly been dealing with this on multiple levels as a the leader trying to facilitate our district's conversation with our whole team, and as a mom of a senior myself, trying to grapple with the loss of this milestone moment, and knowing that the multiple scenarios we've worked through are not going to make everybody happy, no matter what we do, because it's not going to be holding it in the traditional way we have, because we can't. So again, the thought has been around our plan B, plan C is, okay, how do we then do the best of what we can with what we can and what we know? Keep in mind, we've been talking about this literally on the heels of April 6th. We literally got remote learning up and going with frameworks, and we started talking about, okay, so what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? While the world in New York looks very different than what we know at April 6th, with what is Arizona coming, with closure, with here we are today, not sure exactly what tomorrow brings, or May 1st brings, and even not sure when the governor is going to talk. And all of us have different ramifications for this. So again, knowing that those have been a lot of our challenges, we've had potential conversations that continue. We right now have been working hard on the logistics of making the best virtual ceremony we possibly could. We initially started with the idea of even organizing, bringing our students in to the HCPA video, and at our very first meeting, that was one of the things we were thinking of doing. We also were looking at that there were multiple companies. Every vendor in the whole wide world who has some kind of virtual something has our contact numbers virtually overnight. I have spent hours, Dr. Thomason has spent hours, the principals have spent hours at nighttime watching marchingorder.com. We're looking at what are some of the university ceremonies, virtual ceremonies looking like. We've seen some good ones, we've seen some not so good ones. Obviously, quality editing and control of the quality event, if you have to do, virtual is a poor replacement for the live thing, but if you're gonna do something virtual, quality matters.
Dr. Foley, I would like to say one of my favorite ones out there, which doesn't have time, is the whole emoji graduation ceremony. If you haven't seen that one, you should look that one up. Although we can't do that because it's very cost prohibitive. It's over $100,000, but each student had their own emoji, but that's something we couldn't do in our time frame.
So one of the things we originally started, our very first meeting, talked about that. Okay, we'll start, what would that look like? How many kids? At the time, this is 10 kids. At the time, it's 10 kids when we were having this conversation, a group of 10. I mean, once upon a time, we could do 250, then groups of 50, now go down to 10. Well, the conversation started going. How many people would be in the HCPA? How many adults would you need to have there facilitating it? How many people would be recording it? Even thoughts we had with, well, maybe we could invite the families into I mean, talk about levels of grieving here as we're trying to replicate special safely. But what if we bring the family in to have them watch? I mean, again, the amount of hours and conversations of what if, what about, could we, should we, what if? Ultimately, principals and teams came back and said, for what we will get, the risk-benefit factor for quality, honestly, is logistically something at this moment, going into May, not sure what the next wave will look like and if we'll be allowed to or not allowed to, probably can't control that part at this moment. So keep in mind at this one point, we were like, let's bring them all in, let's 5 at a time, 4 at a time. Parents in the audience, nope, can't do that. How would we clean it? I mean, let me just tell you the exhaustive conversations and anguish we've had, because we all want to celebrate our kids special. We don't want to be accused of not doing enough for or making it special enough for our kids, but at the same time, don't want to create a scenario where we create a health hazard that may alter the course of the rest of your human life in a pandemic and global effect that we don't even know the extent of yet. So these are the anguishes our team has been grappling with. And so one of the things that came up with was our wonderful, and again, I think this speaks to the heart of our team in Higley, was Matt Markling, who is the equipment manager at Williamsfield, who has an amazing skill set with computer and design and coding, said he had worked on creating these beautiful award ceremonies last year where you could get individual input in an Excel document and pre-populate these beautiful slides. He says, I have an idea, this might work. So our thought was, let's start getting kids involved with what we don't know. Let's start working on, because by the time we do know, starting to put something together of quality is too late. So the idea is, let's do something while we're in the middle of figuring out what might we be able to do or not do. So Matt created these beautiful templates that show their beautiful picture, their senior picture, with the ability for them to customize what are your future plans, who do you want to thank. So we worked with our Canvas team to create an assignment in our remote learning in our English classes, and we have a handful of kids who don't have English classes, Paige being one of them, who we had to work with. How would we get this information from these students? But it's an assignment where they enter it in, the teachers extract it from Canvas, it goes over in a file, and it automatically takes their senior picture with their student, with their information, and populates these beautiful slides that have their school logo that could be what would be shown when their name was read, with time, obviously, going back to the editing of this, quality of this. Because the whole idea of walking was, how do you cut, create a quality video that is, what if we don't have a kid who shows up, where this could be something that would be a solid background, something we could do while preparing. The other thing that and again, having watched multiple videos, Alan had said, one of the things I saw that looked kind of unique was an opportunity for kids to wear their cap and gown, was an ending piece with a turning of the tassel and editing thing. Now, some people go, that is cute. Some people go, oh my God, that's so corny. But this was here's an option for kids to have if they want to. If we have a real ceremony, great, we'll edit it in as the part while they're really doing it. If not, it gave an opportunity for us to have something. Again, going back to, it's really impossible to replicate the real here. How do we involve them with creating a quality piece that we can control? One of the things we're worried about is going with a company, spending a lot of money, having no control over the final product, and being held hostage up till the end and releasing whatever you've got. So in the meantime, using Matt's skills, we've had students, May 1st is the due date from our students on this, so we could at least create these beautiful slides with their gorgeous senior pictures from their yearbook, and allowing to customize it, their words, their video if they want to. So again, these were ideas that evolved over hours of conversation of what can we do right now with not knowing what we don't know tomorrow brings. So then in the meantime, each principal has customized, basically has taken their commencement ceremony and identified who, the speaking parts, who are the speakers, and are going to be working with, in recording actually starting today and into the next week, scheduling both Williamsfield and Higley High, the videoing of speeches, the videoing of the different components of the ceremony that would have historically happened had it been live, so that there'd be enough time to capture it and be sure we edited those well. So again, in light of the timeline, the idea is that in the next 2 weeks to finish capturing all those parts and pieces, and we actually created like a little timeline so that the little videos from the students and all these could be edited together so that by the 15th we could see what these two things look like. The idea would be that right now we have created a on our HCPA TV. There are two links. There would be the Higley High ceremony that would be shown at 9:30 as it was historically planned with that link, and then at the Williamsfield would have that link. Now, the problem is this has not been broadcast to the whole wide world, because the idea of saying we are canceling ASU before the governor has officially come out and said you can't have large gatherings is one thing, but pretty quickly here, either as soon as we know, we have communication that would say, this is what we're doing instead, because I know that as a mama who would want to do some kind of an announcement for my family, I would love to be able to put, if I knew that was happening for my child, I'd want to be able to put that link there for my auntie to be able to watch my part, if whatever we choose to do. So this idea would be these ceremonies that we would have John and Bob Zucker would be part of doing the editing of all of these pieces to create the highest quality virtual ceremony with the speakers. There is some work being done about the music part. How do we get all those parts and pieces in? Some recorded there, trying some Zoom style to see best quality, what can we do? All of these things take time to replicate, recreate, and edit together because although it will not replace, if we're going to do a virtual ceremony, we want to do something the best we can. Virtually everybody we've talked to is doing a virtual ceremony of some type. Talked just this morning again with representatives from Chandler, talked with people from Queen Creek. All of them are still kind of holding here, but most are shying, although talked about the bringing kids in, most are coming to the reality, not going to do that because of time and quality issue. And some of them may be working with different vendors and otherwise. But the idea would be, we had talked about too, the idea of, and again, all of our ideas, diplomas and programs being mailed to families so that they can get them nice and neat and not crunched in a drive-through or get the wrong one. Nice and neat diplomas mailed with programs. The idea that we would refund graduation fees, the idea of not knowing what we don't know, what tomorrow brings, holding on to your money right now, while we don't know if, when, where, who, how much, are the ideas that we've been talking about as far as this virtual ceremony and the challenges we've been grappling with. So what we know is with what we don't know, we have begun working through the putting together the parts and pieces of the best virtual ceremony that we can at this moment, with all hope that we didn't have to use it. But that's where we're at right now.
President Kaler, members of the board, I know this is an unconventional superintendent's update, but this is an unconventional time, and so I wanted to make sure that we got this out to you as soon as possible, knowing that everything that we're doing, we're still going to not make everybody happy, but we're still going to try to do our best. We're still looking into a bunch of different options and a bunch of different plans. Even if the virtual still happens, we still have other things we're looking into also. But at this time, I would also like to open it up to you guys for questions, comments, concerns.
President Kaler, thank you. And I hear you, and I appreciate all of the work that you guys are doing. Zoom meetings are hard. As soon as someone starts to talk, then someone else is talking because it's a delay, then everyone stops, and then it's all quiet, and then they go again. And it makes a meeting very, very difficult. Not to mention any background noise, we do all we can. We are here because we felt our homes would not work well with trying to do a meeting like this. We all know the governor's supposed to make an announcement today of what we look like in the near future, and our technical stay ends tomorrow, so he has to decide something, and we can anticipate what that's going to be. We can make assumptions, and we can anticipate. I guess my question, and it breaks my heart, I hear you, these poor kids, these seniors, there are certain things that are just a rite of passage as you grow up. Your senior prom, senior ditch day, your awards that some of these kids have just worked so hard for, and graduation. And while we have put on great graduation ceremonies, we know it's not about the ceremony for the kids, it's about celebrating with their friends. And they look at each other, they could care less of any of us up there talking, they could care less about the speeches. They are there with their friends for a sense of accomplishment. And the way all this ended was so abruptly. And that goes from our kindergartners are probably having more of a problem with it than our seniors of not being in school, because as human beings, we're not programmed to just end that. We have a process, we have a, there's only a week left of school, let's say goodbye, let's say we'll see you next year. And that's hard emotionally for everybody, and same with our kids. But at some point, we have to make a decision. And like Dr. Thomason said, through this whole global pandemic, there are no winners. Everyone's losers on all levels. People missing out on their college graduations, and, unfortunately, people missing out on funerals. And I mean, we are in a horrible time as people right now. And everyone has their own opinion on what's safe and what's not safe. And so there are no winners in this whatsoever. The governor is to make an announcement today. At some point, we have to make a decision, and a final decision, that based on the information we have today, this is what we're going to do. And we can't say, well, as of today, we're going to do this, but we expect him to make a change in 2 weeks, so we're going to kind of hold out. We owe it to our kids, we owe it to our families, and we owe it to our staff to say, we're making a decision, and it's the best decision we can make for our students, for our staff, for the safety of our community, knowing we're making that decision based on the information we have today. I hear with hope. I get waiting until today's announcement to kind of see what the governor's anticipating over the next 30 days. But we can't wait 30 days. And honestly, I don't even think we can wait 14 days, because families have to make decisions. And especially as we start to return to work, parents will no longer be able to work from home. If we are going to do something, we have to give them time to plan. People will be back at work, or they're working from home. They still have to request time off. These are in the middle of the day. So what are we looking at for a drop-dead date? We will make our final decision of what our graduation looks like.
President Kaler, members of the board, we're looking at a drop-dead date as soon as Governor Ducey makes the announcement. If he says that we can have no groups larger than 50, 250, then we have already prepared. We're already virtual for our graduation. We've already started that process. That's the direction we're going. The second piece of that is what will the virtual piece look like? So right now, we've made the choice that because of groupings of 10 or less, it's not safe and prudent to bring kids in and to videotape them going across the stage. If that loosens up, we will make that decision today, if he announces today on whether we may bring kids in to have them videotaped and walk across the stage. I do believe that we will also have to look at the quality of that, because putting together 500 separate videos is something we would have to look at too. So if the quality is not there, that's out also, quite honestly. If we have to piece together 500 separate students walking across the stage and we can't get the sound and quality correct, we're going with plan A, and that is the virtual, with the student's name being read, their picture and their future plans and thank yous being shown on a PowerPoint type situation, with all of our other planned graduation speeches, color guard, and then ending at the very end with students after the graduation ceremony, those that choose to turn in the turning of the tassel, having that as kind of a fun celebration at the end after the ceremony is complete. That's where we're at right now today.
Dr. Foley, I just wanted to thank you and Mr. Tannenbaum, since you're sitting here. Thank you so much for all the work you guys have done. Like Mrs. Reese said, the having a Zoom call is not easy, and to try to figure this all out that way is above and beyond to me. And I want to thank you and both your teams, and Dr. Thomason as well, and your team, because I know that this was not the decision any of us wanted to make. We all are sad when we are seeing those decisions being made. And I just want to thank you, because I know that it has to be heart-wrenching for both of you as well. Thank you.
President Kaler, Mrs. Wilson, the rest of the board too, we would be remiss if we didn't give a thank you to our community out there that are doing so many things outside of the educational setting. The yard signs that we've had out there, the things of adopting a senior, all the plans. This has been a huge commitment, and thank you to our community outside of the educational setting. For some reasons that we cannot do some of the things that are suggested because of social distancing rules, because of some insurance constraints and those things. So thank you to our community and everyone who is stepping up to try to do the best we can to make it special for our seniors. That is extremely recognized by this cabinet and this board of all the things that they're doing above and beyond what would normally happen. So thank you to our community for that.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Thomason. Dr. Foley and Mr. Tannenbaum, thank you again. I know this has been difficult. I too have a senior, so my heart has crushed right along with her. Although at some point she's already checked out, so you know, every senior is a little bit different. Some are really holding on to that last hope that there will be a graduation, and then there's others that just have already tossed their cap and said, I'm done. So with that said, though, I know that there's been a lot of conversations about doing a later graduation sometime in the fall, or that. Is that going to be even an option for us? Because I know that even ASU, the facility, is going to be undergoing some type of reconstruction from what I remember. So I know people are saying, well, okay, I get that we'll do this virtual now, that's great, but are we going to do something later? Or, I mean, there's so many ideas out there, and I'm sure you've chewed on them all, but like Mrs. Reese said, one of the greatest things, they just want to get together and take pictures and maybe have a yearbook signing on our campuses if they get to be reopened. Just something that the seniors can gather still and do that. Is that going to be something we talk about or plan or communicate? I don't know.
President Kaler, members of the board, there have been lots of discussions on that. At this time, I believe that with students going on missions and going to college out of state and some going into the military service and that, I don't believe bringing them together for a ceremony is going to be able to take place just because people are moving on with their life. However, I do believe that there has been a huge loss for this group. I would like us to put something together for the future, not for a graduation type ceremony, but as you say, an opportunity for them to get together. I'm thinking more of a prom type situation. They've missed out on their senior prom. And so if we can take a look at next year or in the future or in the summer or maybe for their 5-year anniversary, I don't know what it looks like. I honestly don't. But I do know that the district does have funds set aside for our graduation, that we owe it to these guys to look for something for them to celebrate in the future, and we could put that to the side for their celebration at a 5-year reunion, at a 2-year reunion next summer, maybe if they all come back in 2 years after their sophomore year or after their missions, that we'll take a look at something like that, and that money will be put to the side for them. But we'll also work with our student council's senior class to help us make those decisions.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tannenbaum.
Sure, absolutely.
Appreciate you being here.
To answer any questions.
Well, I know Higley's parents are doing some things. What are the Williams Fields parents? Are they going to be doing like an adopt a senior and things?
Yeah. So, you know, we've had different parent groups reach out to us, and of course we support them, and we've talked to them, and we've given ideas of what we find and what they want to do. Of course, we're just trying to provide support. Some of the family adoptions and those pieces, obviously, that's going to be more of a like the booster clubs that get into that compared to the school providing information, regarding students and some of the worries there of who is adopting and how are we communicating that. So from the school setting, we're going along with, I can speak for us, we're doing our best of the nest still. We're actually doing recordings. Each teacher is doing their, using Flipgrid to record a special message to them. So we're still holding true with our traditions, though they have changed the viewing of them. They'll still be there, and our award ceremony as well for our top seniors and our graduation totals and all of those elements. And then the other side of it is, there is conversations about a dance and what that would look like. We have started those types of conversations. They're filled with lots of what if questions, but we are working on it, and we are communicating with our different booster groups that are trying to run. Yesterday we had signs being picked up on our campus that students and parents ordered as well.
That's great, and I love seeing everything we put out there on social media too. It's really important, so thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Okay, thank you, Dr. Foley. Thank you, Mr. Tenenbaum. All right, are there any board comments today?
Mrs. Kaler. I just want to thank all of our teachers. Next week is Teacher Appreciation, and while it looks very different for us, I just want to thank all those teachers who work hard every day and have now a new normal of learning for our kiddos, because that's not easy. And also a special congratulations to our Teacher of the Year, because we did not get to have our ceremonies that we normally have in April. It got canceled, obviously. So I just want to thank those Teacher of the Year. They're just so special to us, and they got nominated, and we will be doing a ceremony, I'm sure, in the fall, but it is something nice to just thank them and just thank our booster clubs and our PTOs and all those people who are going to make those Teachers Week next week really special. So thank you.
Mrs. Reese, did you have something?
I did. I just wanted to kind of still piggyback on the meetings and these teachers working from home and doing Zoom meetings and all of our administration and everyone. Our days have become so much longer that we don't have set work hours anymore. And so anyone who might have the opinion that because our teachers are working from home or staff is working from home, that they're at home watching Oprah or Dr. Phil or sitting on the couch eating bonbons is not the case at all. And I want to recognize that scheduled work hours have gone out the window, and we find that we are working harder and longer these days. And I want to thank everyone for that. We do recognize that. While they may not hear that same message from everybody because of varying opinions, and that's okay, we do recognize that. And Dr. Foley, thank you. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine being you right now. I don't know if you're sleeping because things just don't stop. And thank you for all your work. Like you said, our first focus was getting virtual learning up and running. And you had to figure all that out and navigate that and then have to disseminate that out. And then we have graduation. And we're already having to talk about what does next year look like. And we're playing the what if game. And although Kathy Hoffman said that they're working on it, based on what they've indicated, I would say school's going to resume. I can't promise, but I would say school's going to resume as scheduled next year, but it's going to look very differently. And we're going to have to figure that out. And so we're trying to balance finishing up this year, but starting next year already. And so thank you. I know you have worked tirelessly, and I'm sure all hours of the night, and conducting meetings and trying to figure everything out. So thank you for all your time and effort. We know that you're doing all this, and while a teacher appreciation week is next week, and we do appreciate our teachers, and they're working even harder than they have, and all the memes out there on the parents with having to help teach their kids, we have a even greater appreciation for our teachers. So, but I want all the administrators to know, and everyone know, we know you guys are working even harder. We know you're working longer, and your jobs have become so much more difficult. So I wanted to say thank you to you guys as well, and that we do recognize that. So, and just on the tail end of that, it's Gilbert's Kindness Week, and that has been a week that we have recognized for several years now, and Mayor Daniels has put that in. So let's all take a moment, even in the time of frustration and everything else, and just remember to be kind to other people. Everyone's going through different things, and we're all going through a global pandemic, but we all have different things going on. So just remember, it is Kindness Week in Gilbert, and spread a little kindness. And it doesn't have to stop at this week, just saying. So thank you so much.
President Kaler.
Mr. Glover.
Oh, I think Mr. Witovich wants to say something. Go ahead.
President Kaler, I don't know if the rest of the board or the community members are aware of that a lot of the administration, the principals, have been personally calling each student's family and checking up on them, and I think that that act of kindness has gone a long way, and thank them for doing that.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't going to, but since we're all saying something, I know it's Teacher Appreciation Week, but not to go unrecognized. We really should just call it, Educator or Educator Professional Week. Our custodians, these kids left at spring break. Their desks were still full, so the stuff has to get from the desks to home, and then the rooms have to be cleaned, and the schools have to be cleaned. So the custodians on the front lines have really been working hard and keeping us safe, and I will continue to fight for to increase their wages. But paras have been doing odd jobs. The technology department, I'm sure, is tired. The front office staff, who is, in the line of fire. The transportation department, I understand, has been pitching in wherever needed. Food services is still working. All of these folks are still working. There's work to be done, and it would be easy to just stay at home and shut the door. Well, it's not easy. On paper, it's easy, but they are reporting to work, and they're working, and so I appreciate all of them. I agree with everything that you all have said, and I second that, and but also those underappreciated folks as well.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. I agree. And with that, there's also somebody else we want to thank, and that is our board secretary.
We can't forget our administrative professionals.
Exactly, and she keeps us in line all the time and keeps track of where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing and so much more. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts, Darlene. You are very much appreciated by this board. And I echo all the other sentiments. Yes, teachers, I love all the memes and videos of pay him $1 million now. Like, I totally understand that and I get it. So it's been, I try to find the positives in all of this, and I have a speech that I'm writing for our virtual graduation, and I'm going to just put the positive spin on it as much as I possibly can, because it is hard. It's been difficult, and we just need to try to find the good in the bad. So, okay. Any other board comments? Okay. I move that we approve consent agenda items 5.1 to 5.7.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. I did hear Mr. Witovich. Okay, we're going on to any questions on our financial report from Mr. Gary Holland. No. Okay, well, I guess it's going to be the Dr. Foley show again, and we're going to go over all these calendars, which is very exciting.
Yay! And what's exciting is that this is a little bit more than just the, oh. Can you hear me better now? Better? Okay. This is exciting because this is a little bit more than just the calendars, because if you'll recall, my very first presentation to you with the high school principals was the whole late communication to you about the late start. And we also had a subsequent conversation in our work studies about professional development opportunities in our district, particularly for middle school. So what's really nice in this calendar recommendation, obviously we had already had the calendar for the 2021 school year, but what we did was made the recommendations and changes to next year's school year. Of course, we say with the caveat, this is what we know at this moment with our plans for what this calendar looks like right now. What would our calendar look like? So we made the changes to the 2021 school year, keeping in mind the professional development plans for the district and actually building them into the calendar, working with, obviously I had an amazing calendar team, but we also then worked with teacher groups, professional development recommendations, and the principals that we then brought to the calendar committee. So this is kind of like a multifaceted calendar approach. So this is good. So you will see that our calendar committee was large. What's exciting about our calendar committee was we had principals and teachers, community members, board member, but who all had multiple perspectives on this committee. Some of them were parents, some of them were for representing a teacher perspective or an arts perspective or an athletics perspective. So we were trying to, an HR perspective. We had a pretty large voices in the room here that were part of this conversation. So we had a timeline, you can, perfect, timeline so that you could see that what we did was started this back in January and then would bring, had done some pre-work with the professional development prior to that to bring to the committee from the get-go. And we started working through calendars, and we learned along the way. We started color coding the calendars. We were naming the calendars elephant calendar. You know, we had some years that the calendar really worked nicely, other years not so much. But anyhow, what we're bringing forth to you are the changes for the proposed for next school year, but I'm going to walk you through those because that was already the approved calendar the year before, but you'll see patterns and trends in the projected calendars. Knowing that today is an information item, I understand we found even like there may be an error, a question. I will tell you, so many eyes have looked at this, and I'm glad we're doing this as an information item, then we can do this as a consent. So any fines bring up, but this will allow us to talk about professional development and a lot of other things. Our committee talked about multiple filters, multiple thoughts, perspectives. We would beat up we also had a binder or like folders that had every other surrounding school's calendar. We had everyone who had a calendar out there, what were they doing and how did they do it? And we found that some years, again, the calendar played nicer than others and then started to pattern itself. So some changes that we made. One of the things in the consent agenda I think you just approved was the increase of a base teacher's salary. One of the things that we did was in July, new teachers are going to begin a year early. One of the things that the coaches and I have been looking at is the onboarding process and training for our teachers, and found that this is a great opportunity for us to build in more quality, intentional professional development rather than hurry rush. And so this was one of the opportunities that we took, was adding, by raising the base, we added 1 day for new teachers to Higley. Then you'll see that in August, we started, one of the things that we did with middle schools, and this is where you'll see there was big changes. The world for middle school was not equitable in professional development, and had some unique things happening, two big things. One, middle schools only had the district-wide professional development days. You know, elementaries had every Wednesday, high schools had late start, and you'll see there's a chart later that shows the great inequity. We didn't replicate at the secondary level late start Wednesdays. That's not going to work at the middle school level. What we found, though, was that we didn't want a weekly thing either for K-6. What we found, though, was that talking with teachers and administrators, ideally we wanted to do an every other week early release, similar to the elementaries. It virtually gave the secondary world the same amount of time professional development-wise, and we also added more time in some of those were making sure all of our early release days were K-12 days so that we could do district systemic things all at the same time, so some more consistency there. So the other thing that was a big thing in middle schools was parent-teacher conferences were so early at middle schools, and the teachers say, truly, even elementary teachers on the calendar committee said, I have my same kids all day, and I don't know that I would be ready to really have a meaningful parent-teacher conference that early. And the thought was, they felt like they really aren't as meaningful as they could be. Quite honestly, if we have concern, we're already in touch with you about that. Let's move them back just to the week before, not the same week, but the week before, so it was more like the same amount of time to really make our meaningful time with you. If we're going to early release you, let's make that a meaningful conversation and prior to they felt it wasn't. So we thought, well, here's an opportunity. So you'll see that in August, middle school professional development day was added, and then we moved those moved the conferences back to September. So again,
Dr.
September.
Foley, can I just ask a quick question since
Yeah.
we were just talking about the parent-teacher conferences?
Mm-hmm.
Did they indicate if those parent-teacher conferences are necessary, meaningful? We, at one point, had parent-teacher conferences at the high school level, and they didn't really happen. And from middle school parents, I hear the same thing, is that they really don't happen. The teachers only meet with the students' parents who have a D or lower, and that they're just scheduled by request. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, I would hope if our students have, and I know it's early, but if they're carrying a D or an F, that conversation's already occurring with the parents. So, I mean, I guess my question is is a middle school parent-teacher conference 2 days necessary?
And before you answer, with your permission, may I just add something to that? I'm jumping ahead, but you said something. It looks like, I was not aware that we also do middle school conferences in February, and I was going to ask the same thing, like, did they say that we needed both of those? Is it worthwhile? So your question is great. I would just also say, do we need to have that twice a year? What is the feeling from the middle school teachers?
Okay, so the feeling from the middle school teachers was they wanted to move them. Here was the conversation, and we can also take this back to the committee, because one of the things you'll notice that was the timeline was that we would bring it to you, have a conversation, take any questions, concerns back to the committee, discuss, and again, if we need to extend out the approval, we can't. Here's what the teachers said. The teachers administrators had shared with us, because we asked these similar questions. One, the conversation was, yes, we should be having those conversations with parents much along the way. If there is concern, there's no reason why we shouldn't be communicating with them. That historically, that they felt that there were some parents who still want that time, that they wanted to be able to schedule it if there was concern. So they wanted to build it into the calendar. But I will go second to the conversation being that yes, that it isn't everybody. It's those who they're concerned about, or a parent who wanted to schedule a specific time with them. They felt that they wanted to keep it, but I think it is a historical part that was a carryover from when we were K-8s and parents were used to having those parent-teacher conferences that continue, that there was still that the teachers felt that this was a historical component that they felt that the community thought was important to still have and that teachers would still do. Not that if you had concern about your middle school student, you couldn't communicate with the teacher at any point and schedule a meeting to do that. So they didn't think that taking it off was something that would be something the community would be would want, that we would still want that time carved out. They just wanted more time so that if they had them, that they were more meaningful, so that they kept what had historically been on the calendar and moved it to a time that was similar to what elementary had done. So if the question you would want to pose back is, do you really feel that it is essential to have these at all, then we can have that conversation with our team.
Well, I know also through conversations with parents of middle schoolers, one, if they do have a student that's struggling and maybe they're on an IEP, so they're struggling in multiple classes, that the parents having to visit the campus multiple times, like they can't schedule, they don't have the ability to schedule back to back with different teachers. So they may have to schedule on one day at this time and may have to schedule a later time, and which could be disruptive to their work schedule and make it difficult.
Where having an early release would allow you to do a back, that you could schedule, I'll meet with this teacher and then we'll meet with this teacher.
Well, and the other thing is when I have seen what these signups are, is there are no evening, that they are only doing them up until the time school gets out. Mm-hmm. That even our elementaries are expected to do at least one evening for those parents. Mm-hmm. And when I have seen, a parent say, look, this is my only time that I can go, it's only until the school day ends. Mm-hmm. So at that point, is that conducive? Because then they're having a phone call meeting anyway at that point. So I think there's several things that go on there that if we are going to continue, and I hear you, because in the K-8s, and I don't know anyone, I was here when we had K-8s, and I had a kid in a K-8, and the parents came in, and I believe it's how I've even seen with the 6th grade teachers, those who rotate, is they're not in their classrooms. What I have experienced is they're like in the cafeteria, and there's, the math teacher, the science teacher, and the language arts teacher, and you kind of go, boom, yep, your kid's doing this, boom, yep, your kid's doing, so you get to speak with all three of them right in a row, and be able to get that feedback if your kid's struggling in anything. And if they're not, you can be like, great, we're good. So I think that if we are going to continue in middle school, because it is a very different situation than when we were in elementary, that we do need to look at those times and the availability and make sure they are conducive to parents, and that there is some of that availability, because like I said, I've had parents log in because a lot of them use the Sign Up Genius and things like that, and there is nothing available in the evening. So then it goes back to the perception of our community, and like they were afraid of if our community not wanting or still wanting them. Well, now our perception of the community is they just want an early release. They just want to leave work early because they don't have anything available later on. And I'm not saying that's perception of all community. I'm not saying that's a flat out perception. Those are some people's perception in the comments. So we just need to make sure it's conducive to the early releases and to our parents and things like that. So.
President Kaler, members of the board, it is the recommendation of the district office that for our middle schools on the early releases, that one of them would be a 4-hour extra day, so it should go to 8 o'clock in the evening to make those accommodations for those parents that can't make it earlier in the day. And then Friday would be an earlier release day for those teachers to go home. And also, the expectation from the district office would be that if a parent cannot make it on that Thursday or Friday, they could set up an individualized meeting that should be accommodated by our staff before school or after school. So if those expectations aren't being met, we will talk to the administrators to make sure that that's clear.
Well, go ahead.
I'm going to have a middle schooler next year, which is shocking. But from that perspective, I think it's very good that we're having conferences. We've heard from this board, I've heard the parents coming here that have middle schoolers, and they're concerned about the bullying, they're concerned about the things. So I think that's a great time to bring up those concerns, if not way before, but it's a great way to have an open communication and dialogue with those parents and teachers if something is happening in that class where a parent might not feel comfortable emailing a teacher, having a conversation one-on-one and figuring out why little Billy is struggling in math class might end up leading to that conversation. So I actually agree with having conferences, just because of how much I've heard in this boardroom about bullying in that state, and maybe helping those parents figure out why Billy may be suffering in math class or whatnot. I do think that's a good time to bring that up. I remember from calendar committee, I sat on that committee, I remember historically, the reason we did conferences for middle school that early was to allow changes to happen to schedules, but a lot of the parents and teachers in the room decided that that probably wasn't happening, that parents had already changed schedules way before that August, was it originally August, Dr. Foley? That they had already changed it way before that August date anyway. So to move it back and let that conference be just an academic more conference than a change of schedule conference, if that makes sense to everybody sitting up here.
Yeah. Well, so I still don't understand about this second one in February, but so maybe we could come back to that. But if you're asking my opinion, I would go to, if it were me, I would ask the committee, like, do we really need this one in a second semester, yes or no? And if you don't, then you don't. But my experience as a junior high teacher is, you've got 150, 180, sometimes 200 students. Impossible to get every one, like a kindergarten classroom of 30 parents that come in. So it was parents that we needed to see probably, and I don't know that it made much of a difference ultimately, but it was offered. I agree with what you said, Ms. Wilson, about having an opportunity to do that face to face. But when you talk about historically, we've always done this. That is absolutely true. And that predates the online gradebook, which we have now.
True.
It predates email, which people still do use, not kids, but people still use. And then phone and texting, I mean, we're readily available. So to take, the part of 4 days to have these, I'm not sure that it's worth the effort. So I would give them the opportunity to ask, and to ask the community, do we really need all of these at the middle school level? My gut would say no, but I'm open to whatever they say.
What we'll do is we'll take this back to our middle school administrative team and teacher team, who was part of making some recommendation for the middle school professional development opportunities, and then also the calendar committee to talk about this, because I will tell you, middle school is the area that we've made the most changes, because prior to this, middle school had the fewest amount of early releases or changes start times of any of our groups. So middle school is our problem child on the calendar committee for us to relook at. So I think that, again, the movement was, let's make it so it's more reasonable for these meetings to be more meaningful if we have them. There's also the concern of, if we have them, how are we following practices? Because remember, this year was even weird. One of the weird little changes we made this year was that there was an early release and a parent-teacher conference, and we tried to separate them. But the teachers said, no. We do early release and stay later that night, but that's not what the calendar said. So going back to what is our practice? Why are we having things? Do we need 2 sets of these? What we'll do is we'll bring this back to that group and bring their recommendation back to you for further discussion, hearing your perspective on this information that we've shared today.
Thank you, Dr. Foley. I think one of the things that I remember about them, and I could be wrong, is that they were around a holiday weekend, so
Yes.
so that they would stay Thursday night late, leave early Friday,
But that's
have
not what the
Saturday,
calendar-
Sunday, and Monday.
But that's not what the calendar said.
But that's not how it was supposed to play out. So I appreciate you kind of moving them down, definitely longer period of time to let the kids really sink into their classes. And again, schedules can be changed early on at the middle school level if somebody's in the wrong level. So,
And we're only getting better at how are we using our data to do a best fit for initial placement and making confirming.
yes.
So
We're not having
so
those-
that's a good thing, so that we're not waiting for a time to move it. So we're getting better, but I think we're multiple factors here. What do we have historically done? What makes sense? And so great conversation. We'll bring it back to those members and to the calendar committee, and then we'll come talk about it.
The other thing I was going to say was, yes, I agree with Mr. Glover that maybe just the one set of conferences instead of 2 sets, because by February, we know where we're at.
Well,
There-
the hope
and
would be
this-
is that if you needed to meet with individual students, you would be scheduling to meet with those individual students.
Because by then, those relationships have began and been, a longer term.
Well, and we'll let our data be our guide. How many have we been scheduling? What has the historical need? Let's look at a lot of information to help make an informed decision about what we've been doing and what we
Right.
propose moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking that back. With
And
that,
the only classes changing at the semester are their electives.
right.
So
If- and
it's
some
not like
don't even
it's
change.
brand new.
Correct.
It's, the only thing changing is their electives.
Not their core classes. And so with this, we are still keeping our late start with our high schools.
So one of the things I want to do is continue, now keep in mind, a lot of work has happened on redefining our professional learning communities, the work that we're wanting to do with that. How are we, the high schools wanting to keep that time dedicated moving forward with our growth and opportunity. Now, the world of our Teams meetings is our tool that we're using like Zoom. We've been popping in and out of lots of those. They're wanting to continue with that structure and not change it again. We're only getting better at it. And so that's something we want to continue into next year with professional development opportunity with our high school folks. You'll also see too, as we move through, what we did is anytime there was a K-8 release, we made it a K-12 release so that we could increase, so if we're going to release, let's release and use these as district days for professional development so obviously on those days they're not late start, they're early release. But that added more, so we're doing a nice combination at the secondary level of frequency over duration, but with more opportunity for duration for our bigger issues or curricular pieces we're working on.
And I think that's really important because a lot of our bigger kids watch over the little ones on those early release days. So it's
Anyhow.
important that they line up and they're together. So I do appreciate that, looking at this calendar.
Yep.
Spring break or fall break
Fall
comes
break.
early.
Well, yeah.
And then,
Are you looking at the 2021?
Yes.
Yes.
Just the quick note on that fall break, we need to add the language in September because.
Is that for next school year?
Yeah, for
2021.
2021. We just have indicated fall break is October 1st through the 9th.
Yeah, we kind of got off the last week. We need to add it at the
but
end
it's
of the little
odd
box
to have
in
September in there, so that's new.
That was where it was weird with where, I'll tell you, and Jill, every year we were like, do we move it up? Do we move it back? Where does it fall? Keep trying to keep balance on the numbers of the semester. Thank you, that's a good catch for 2021. And actually, we were laughing because someone found on the existing one that had been approved, November had 31 days. So this one doesn't, but one did. So by the end of this year, seeing squares and numbers and oh my.
And we
thought
really
you'd changed it.
tried to align with some of our neighboring districts because we heard that was a hard piece A lot of parents have a kid in a neighboring district as well, so we had to align, and sometimes our neighboring districts didn't align with each other. So it was like a pick and choose on which one we were going to go with, and keeping the days balanced. It was long meetings, and Dr. Foley did a great job facilitating that meeting.
We had a lot of teacher voices and perspectives, and we could send them back, okay, go talk to your friends, go talk to your colleagues, go talk to your neighbors. What do you think? What are your opinions? What are your concerns? So here's the deal, calendar committee is hard to make people happy too.
Well, even with our state representatives, they're trying to mandate when breaks are, because people are having their kids in multiple places, which is the joy of having open enrollment.
Yes.
But because you choose to have your kids in 3 different places,
Yes.
it does not mean your calendars are going to line up. It's awfully thoughtful. I just have a different opinion on that. I think it's awfully thoughtful that we looked to see what some of our surrounding areas were doing and tried to line them up, but I'm always of the opinion we need to do what's right for our district, and this information's available, and then people can make their choice from there. So thank you for letting us know that, and that was awfully thoughtful of you guys.
Well, what we tried to do too is our working drafts actually had the number of school days that we had in each month. So we were trying, and what did it do to the semester? What would it do to a grading period? What does the number look like? What if we did this? It was good. So here's again the summary for September, October, November. You'll see I kind of broke out what we did, what were the tweaks that were made for each of those months where we added or changed again, like that October one went from a K-8 to a K-12. So you can keep going. Whoever's running those, you're doing a great job. You can slide ahead to the next month.
While we're waiting for that, I'm sure, sorry, Mr. Glover, if you were going to say this. Professional development has been a huge focus of this board, and it's been very important to us. And as we have worked through it and saw the lack of time that we were allowing professional development, and we have been getting there, I think this speaks volumes to our teachers that we value them, their time, and their professional development, and we really do want them to continue their education. We want to support it. We want them in professional learning communities. We want them working across campuses, our middle schoolers working with middle schools teachers, our elementaries, our specials, we are one collective district, and Mr. Witovich has said it many times, we are Higley unified. And so I want to say thank you for not only taking on the calendar, because that's tough as it is, but you moved on this quickly. Our calendar for next year was already approved, and we did not need to rush to make this change to get our middle school teachers' professional development in this calendar, but it is important to us, and we want our teachers to know that and what our expectation is. So for you to take on not just future calendars, but a current calendar that was already approved and ready to go, and I so appreciate you putting the same importance and emphasis on our teacher professional development and recognizing we needed to do something. Like you said, we had late conversation about our high school late starts, and we got that in place fairly quick because, again, we recognized that, and then we had to get on middle school. But thank you, because I think that this really speaks volumes from an administration standpoint that we moved quickly. We recognized we did have a group that was missing this opportunity, and professional development has been extremely important and a direction of this board and part of our strategic plan. So, so while we were waiting for more of the slides to come up, I wanted to say thank you for putting that same emphasis and importance on it.
Well, thank you. And again, we're very excited about it because it is important and it aligns with a lot of the other work that we are doing with our action plans and we needed to have that time. So this was a good time to do that. So you'll notice that as we rolled through, the big theme here was the tweaking of those professional development days, either K-8 to K-12 or middle school adjustments. And so then you'll see that the proposed calendars fit that somewhat to the best that we could, but here was one of the things we had Brian do for us so that we could say, okay, taking a look at those calendars with adding those days, what did we do to our instructional minutes? So the good news is that we far meet or exceed the required minutes. The high school one is unique because of the way they report it to the state. The 912 4 credits, for us, those are typically your seniors. Those are typically your seniors who have 4 credits. Again, we're beyond the minimum there, which is great because you have testing and other unique things that happen there. So we're fine with the instructional minutes by adding those days or for professional development and more consistent. The other thing is by having that, it allows us to be very intentional about our site PD days aligned to your action plans and our district implementation for curriculum and systemic improvement. So it allows us to be real intentional for the planning of that. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to prescribe that across. The next slide you'll see is we had asked, and I think President Kaler, you had said, and it was in a work study, it would be nice to see what does the PD look like. So what you had was what was this year's with next year's with the tweaks that were made. You can see our little green was this year. So middle school glared that it was, we as a group did not have the same opportunity as we're focusing as a district with our administrators on professional learning communities and working together. We need to make sure we're equitable in the time. So you'll see that the secondary now with our proposals, although it's unique how they're doing it, their proposed time is more similar. So secondary has more consistency in elementary and we have more overlap time for systemic. So this is what it looks like now with time down to the minute with our Brian Campbell helped put this together with making sure this is what it looks like. One of the questions that came up, next slide, is what happens because we talked in our committee about what some give the Wednesday off before Thanksgiving, some don't. There was the question, what does our attendance look like? Before Thanksgiving, and here was what our real numbers looked like for the last 2 years. So it looks like, and again, ours is a half day. This is what it looked like. So again, this information was not making recommendation, making a change based on this number, but this was what the number looked like when we talked in the committee. And again, Brian made these beautiful little charts for us. So here is I hear very clearly the conversation and going back to obviously for next year we need to fix our calendar, making sure we capture spring break where it falls a little in September. We also will have the conversation with our committee about the middle school conferences on multiple levels. So what we'll do is bring back those recommendations and changes to the next one as an information item, and then we can bring it back then as a consent.
Dr. Foley, did you also keep, and I didn't count the little squares, but in the past calendars we talked about balancing
Yes.
Roughly 90.
Yes, and what's kind of fun is
days.
that what we did too is in each calendar in the very bottom, we have a little square that showed you, like in the bottom of each calendar, we did a little balance thing. So we also tried to, what we did was once upon a time there was a June in the bottom box, but June had nothing in it. So we thought, you know what, let's kind of put our start times and early release times there, and we did the instructional minutes. Some years played nice for us with the nice 90-90 There is the year of 22, 23, where it's a 91, 89, no matter how you cut it. The calendar didn't cooperate. The 23, 24 is a 91, 89. And then the worst of them, the worst offender was the 24, 25, was the 95, 85. And we spent a lot of time debating that one. It just was, the way that the holiday break fell that year was really fun. So.
I should have looked at that.
Oh, that's
it
okay.
occurred to me as
No,
we were talking.
But
Probably-
but what you brought up was Mrs. Wilson can attest, Member Wilson can attest, a lot of conversation from the teachers on how to balance the quarters, the semesters, the grading, and what it meant. What it meant. Sometimes this was the blue calendar. Sometimes it was it named the name because it was a frustrating calendar. So, yeah.
And then I think Vice President Reese was talking about PD, and I just will also say again, I do think having a person who a large chunk of their job is devoted to professional development, keeping track, making sure all the groups are fairly, and we have the electives, all that stuff is a worthwhile investment. I know you're probably taking a lot of it, but I would continue to advocate for that and trying to find money for that. I think that's worthwhile. And then I'm going to tattle on myself a little bit, maybe, I think. I don't know if I missed that this was being worked on, or like this came as a surprise that this was all being done. When was that communicated to us? Because I don't know if I have to kick myself or did I?
I can answer. No, I mean, because the calendars were already approved.
Right.
So this is something they went ahead and just took on to get that middle school. You didn't miss anything. So it wasn't, oh, we will be bringing these calendars forward.
Okay. Well, I guess for my 2 cents, I'm nosy. I'm a busybody, I guess. I would have appreciated knowing that you guys were working on that. Not that I would have butted in, and I hope you don't feel like I butt in too much. But I probably would have liked to known that was being worked on. I know Ms. Wilson did. You were on the committee, but I didn't know about that. So
I think that goes back to what we were talking to Dr. Thomas about our superintendent's report, that would have been something that you could include for us, that we would have known that Dr. Foley's team was working on this. So I agree with you, Dr. Glover, you just got promoted. But I agree, it's good to know what you're working on, and we appreciate all the hard work that went into this. I know the teachers too appreciate ending before Memorial Day, so I know that you had these constraints. I just wanted to ask Mr. Glover, or not Mr. Glover, Mr. Witovich, is there anything you'd like to say or add about our calendars? Mr. Witovich?
Yes, no comment.
Are you okay with the calendars? Is there anything you'd like to add or say?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
President Kaler, one last thing. Also, I'm not trying to harp on the middle school. Or the parent-teacher conferences. I'm really not. I've just noticed, though, that at least that one in September, that gives them 4 early release days when there is only 19 days that are scheduled for school.
Yeah.
And so that we do have quite a bit of open enrollment, especially in the south part of our district where Coronado is technically scheduled to go to Cooley. A lot of them do open enroll to Sossaman, so they're responsible for getting for their own transportation. So that may be something to look at, that there are 4 early release days in a shortened month because we have Labor Day and we also start our fall break in those.
Yep.
So, and thanks for bringing that up, President Kaler. I don't know if people don't understand the history of our calendars. It has been our history that we work from Memorial Day back, and we work backwards. So people ask, why do we start so early in July? Why this? A lot of our counterparts go back to school after Memorial Day, even if it's only 2 days. That history for Higley is we work backwards on our calendar, and we start from that Memorial Day. and work backwards. So it's some good history for people to understand and know why we start, because I know I hear it all the time, why can't we start a week later and go past Memorial Day or go into June, or, because sometimes that's what our neighboring districts do. But again, we're doing what Higley, and it has been Higley's history to work backwards from Memorial Day.
Yep.
President Reese, or Vice President Reese, sorry. We also heard that from our teachers on the committee. They wanted that cutoff, that final day was Memorial Day, that weekend. They wanted that, even if they had to come back a day or two after to finish out their contracts, they wanted that to be for sure the last day for students. They didn't want to come back. They didn't want 2 days. They said it was a waste of their time to come back with students 2 days. They made it very, very clear on our committee. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because we do hear that a lot. But our teachers, and they really enjoyed, our teachers made it very clear that we're on the committee to make sure that day was very sacred, that that was the day they wanted to work till. And also, the other thing I remember was the 2 weeks. That was the first thing they said. Every teacher in the room, Dr. Foley came in and said, do we need to discuss the 2 weeks? And every single parent, every single person in that room said no. Every person who told us and represented us in that room was no, and everyone we've talked to said no, no, no. Very few and far between do we ever get the, why don't we go back to a week? But it is something to bring up, and it's something to remind our community that may be watching that there is a lot of teachers who choose Higley because of the schedule we set.
We even proposed, we brought in that historically there had been a survey as recent as the last couple of years, and that there had, did we feel the need to do another survey, and the committee
Thank you for
was-
not doing another survey.
We didn't. So we built it moving forward with that, so.
That's perfect. Well done. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again next month.
Bring it.
Any other questions or concerns before I move on? All right. Thank you, Dr. Foley. 6.3, I move that the governing board approve increasing the base salary schedule for new certified teachers by $1,000 to $41,000 a year for the 2020-21 school year.
Second.
Any questions or concerns on this? Mr. Glover? Dr. Glover?
Yeah, oh, you already voted? No, just one question. So what does that mean for a teacher who's already signed? I mean, how does the communication take place? How will they know that? Because it would be, assuming this passes, I'd be stoked if I got that email, if it was an email.
Yes, so Mr. Glover, members of the board, what we're going to be doing is doing addendums. There are actually a number of individuals who we've offered contracts to who've accepted. You'll notice if you paid attention on the GBA, we hired about 35 certified teachers. We're actively working very hard, even with COVID-19, and just modifying how we do this, but hiring, getting offers out. So we'll be sending them all addendums, and most of them know that we had anticipated going up. Just the timing of a number of things didn't get it on the board agenda sooner. Just the craziness of our work and our lives and what's been happening. So they're hopeful and crossing their fingers that this gets approved today, and then we could modify with those addendums and give the information to them.
Thank you for continuing to work on this, because I know that that was in the works prior to all of this happening. So thank you for bringing it to us today. Any other questions or concerns? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those, motion passes 5-0. I did hear Mr. Witovich. It's like this little voice in a box over here. It's kind of throwing me off a little bit. All right, so now we're going to move on for the approval. Is Dr. Fowler coming to present anything or no today?
Yes, President Kaler, members of the board, I did.
There he is.
Just text him to let him know.
Ask and ye shall receive. So just so for the audio, Dr. Fowler is going to present to us the request for qualification, the RFQ for the field house at Williamsfield High School.
President Keller, we need to make a motion. It's a,
Oh, yeah, we're going to approve, so I'll make a motion that the governing board approves the posting of a request for qualifications for the field house at Williams Field High School.
I'll second.
Now we have the discussion.
President Kaler, members of the board, what you have before you is a request for qualifications, which is our procurement process. We've been working closely with Orcott Winslow, one of our approved architects, and working with them closely with some key stakeholders at Waynesfield, including community members, coaches, administration, in preparation for putting this proposal out. This is a document that our finance department, Karen Finn, puts out there. I think the technical term is out on the street to basically let construction companies know that this is a project that's we're looking for people that are interested, and that process follows, if you'll remember, very similar to what happened with the weight room. And we would put those out there, and then once those bids come back, there's a committee that Karen leads with some of those key pieces, that stakeholder groups that we talked about, and we make a selection anywhere from 3 to 5 companies that we use a scaled process. I believe you've seen that, similar again to what we did with the weight room, and then we would have those groups come back. Of the 5 that we select, then they get about 2.5 weeks, I think, to put their A game on, and they present those documents to us, and then believe we'd bring that again back to the board for final approval.
Can I interrupt for just a second? Ryan, can you pull up the slides for the floor plans? Because my iPad is, so that'd be awesome. Thank you.
And what you're looking at is there's 3 pictures. I think 2 of them are the floor plan, and then one is a rendering, sort of the elevations view. This project would bring Waynesfield. Again, we've been working, over the years to bring our campus, bring some equity to our campuses, and this was one area where we felt that in comparison to Higley, Waynesfield still had some areas for growth. And talking about locker room facilities for both the boys and girls sports, and also equipment room, training room, and then restrooms. If you see there, the existing concession will be demolished, and the restrooms and concession area that are in the existing concession will now be part of this building as well. So if you see to the right and to the left at the top, those are the restroom areas, and the concession would be right front and center there. So that would replace the building that exists now that's going to be demolished. And I'll answer any questions that people have. Oh, there's what we look like from the outside.
President Kaler?
Mrs. Reese.
I just want to say thank you. I know that it kind of, different things came up midway through, and so some changes were made with the vision and thought of what, from the campus standpoint, what their vision is for the future and what their field will look like for the future. I know initially when they were looking at it, it was going to see how we can continue with that current building, but then based on what their vision is for the future at Williams Field, it wouldn't work out so well. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to those viewpoints and making some changes, and planning ahead that we may in the future have some changes, and it would work based on how it is right now, and it would work based on their vision for the future. So I just wanted to thank you, and same with the architects for being open to hearing that, and so we're not in a couple years from now going, oh, now we need to do something else, so that we're really planning ahead
Thanks, President Reese. Let me clarify. So initially, in some of the designs and discussions that we talked about, we were trying to, and hopefully I'll never be accused of not trying to save the district money, because that's always been something that we've really worked hard at, being very good stewards of the very limited funds that we have, and continue to work hard to get as many SFB funds that are available, even though they keep changing the rules. So that continues. So one of the things that we tried to do on this initially was to save the existing concession stand, because it's there, and can't we just sort of maybe even gut it and upgrade it? And so we really looked through it and tried to exhaust that. But what Vice President Reese is referring to, in a long-term plan, we feel like we would eventually like to move the home side from where they sit now to the other side of the field. Part of the challenge is those bleachers are really identical, but what happens is, if you've ever been to a game and sit home side, the sun just beats right down on our home side just prior to kickoff, and then the sun sets, and it's not as bad, but that was really just a poor design. And so right now with our field as it's located, we have the logo there and the stand on that side. It would certainly be a future project, but our recommendation would be, when it comes time to redo those fields, and when we would do that, to flip the field and then also either move the press box or abandon the existing one and have a new one. And that way our home side would then become the visitor side. And not that we don't want to be good hosts, but the visitors could enjoy the sun, the great Arizona sun as we know it in July, even August, and sometimes September. So that's what Vice President Reese was referring to. And so in the attempt to be as resourceful and spend as little as we needed to, that's why we were trying to make it work with that concession area. And then when we pulled it back and got some more input and listened to more people, we came back and decided that this is a better recommendation. And so that's why you see what's before you. I'll still, again, answer any questions.
Yes, Dr. Fowler, thank you for bringing up the fact that you are a good steward of our financials. So how is this going to be funded? What is our source for funding of the field house?
This would be bond funds. However, as you may or may not know, projects that encompass any of our adjacent ways, like you see the part in the gray there, that's actually a fire lane. And so any work related to that, we submit through the SFB, and typically that's covered through our adjacent ways funds. So besides the pieces that would touch and be eligible for adjacent ways, which we always get approval through the SFB, which is the state requirement, the remaining funds would come from our bond.
And I just had piggyback leftover bond funds that the people approved because they were left over because we...
yes, yeah. Reallocated bond that we were successful in.
I was going to say the same thing, that these are reallocated bond funds thanks to our voters. And I know that Williamsfield has been waiting very patiently for this, maybe not so patiently, but they have been asking for this for quite a while. So making some dreams come true for our athletes for sure. Any other comments?
Go ahead. Okay. I just had a question. When are we looking to start this? Or I know we're putting out the bids, correct? And then does it depend then on the contractors? How does this process work?
And I don't have my calendar right in front of me. I will.
You can just put it like
what I would do
dates.
is I have that. I just didn't bring it with me. I'll share it with Dr. Thomason and have it included in his superintendent's report. But just a quick timeline. The bid has to be out on the street for 2 weeks, advertised in a publication, and then it has to be in for 2 more weeks. And so once we've followed that process, then the next step is the selecting the company, and then they put their bid processes. So my hope would be, if it all goes according to plan, that I'd be able to bring back to our June meeting, which the last time I checked was the 24th, if that's correct. I have to confirm that, but that I would have for you a first, second, or third choice for a construction company, and they could, begin the construction at that point.
Well, your board sure loves a timeline, so bring it on.
You will have that in the next day, so with Dr. Thomason's superintendent's report.
And then Dr. Fowler, thanks. The only other thing I did not see in the drawing is, and I've heard some people mention it, so I just want to ask, but I think it could use existing rooms, an area for the referees. Would they just use an unused locker room off season?
I need to check that. I know Mr. Stengel's been very involved in that, and I don't want to speak because I think there's a plan, but I can't remember if it was in this space or their existing space. They were certainly going to take care of the officials.
Okay, all
That's
right.
a
I had
great
heard
question.
that.
It's a great question, but I'll include that answer
Okay.
with the superintendent's report for Dr. Thomas.
Yeah, thanks. So it's safe to say that we think that the parents and the boosters that we've seen before at our meetings are happy.
Yes, when I refer to stakeholders, one of those members are very involved in our discussions.
No, good. No, there's a lot of things that have happened at Williamsfield that we've listened and allocated money and funds, and I
know they appreciate it. They really do.
Yeah.
They really do.
President Kaler and members of the board, with this project at Williamsfield, there'll just be two different projects that would bring both high schools to equal facilities, and that would be adding lights to the Williamsfield tennis courts for that side, but then also adding bleachers to the Higley High School campus too. So both campuses would have equal facilities, and those are the last two projects. Every year we've done a project to try to help out the district to equalize our high schools, and we're getting there slowly but surely.
Well, and with football 6A coming to Higley, that's really important as well for our bleachers to grow.
President Kaler, members of the board, I would also like to say too is that the process that the Higley Unified School District has utilized now for RFQs and the bid process is something that is not being utilized anywhere, and it's saving our district and having high competition within the construction industry. And so I want to recognize Dr. Fowler on that too. It's not just the RFQ, it's also best and final after the RFQ and invitations from the district to select bidders that helps us get the best price.
Yes, thank you, for sure. And I know you work so hard with SFB and trying to save us money. And I really liked, and I'd like to try and use this process when we are looking at projects like this, that we are talking to 5-10 years out, because like you said, when we looked at the original plans, what may be in our 2 to 5 year plan, then this would not have been as conducive the way it was initially, and then we would look at spending more money. And so I think that's important that, yes, potentially it is costing us a little bit more to do it this way, but when we talk about what we would have had to do in the next 5 years, it would have gone far beyond what the difference is. So I think that that needs to be part of any of our ongoing building conversations, that whenever we're doing projects like this, that we're talking to the administration and say, what is your vision for the future? Doesn't mean we can do it or it's going to be on their timeline, but if we know what their vision is for their campus, then we can make sure, is there something we need to do different now that will save us in the long run? So you work really hard at saving us money, so I think, again, in the long run, that is what we will be doing with these plans versus trying to save the concession stand. And I appreciate the thought process, and you're very, very well aware of cost. So thank you for that. We do appreciate it.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Mr. Witovich, do you have anything?
No comments.
Thank you. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Fowler. Now we're moving on for 6.5. I move that the governing board approve the reimbursement of $2,229.01 for out-of-state travel expenses for Aaron Dilly.
Second.
Any questions or concerns?
President Kaler?
Yes, Dr. Thomason.
I know this is extremely unconventional for this to come up, but I honestly wanted to put this on the board agenda, and I asked Dr. Fowler to stay here too to answer any questions on this aspect too. But as we've seen with the Auditor General this year, and in full transparency, we want to make sure that we bring every payment to district employees to the board. I know this is something that is unusual, and we have done this in the past, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask questions on this subject. It was not put in appropriately for the beginning for the travel expenses, and so I asked Dr. Fowler to be here too to answer those questions and to talk about that aspect. So I thank you for your consideration.
President Kaler?
Yes, Mrs. Reese.
Lots of questions. One is, I guess I'll go through my questions, is like, why is this coming to the board? Because it's clearly outside of our practice and our policies and procedures. There's one, it's not an expectation of our athletic directors to travel with our teams. And if we're going to choose to do so, then we choose to do so ourselves, and that should be our own cost. If we're choosing to travel with the team because it's necessary, then they need to be listed on the field trip request. And so the field trip request to Florida for the students for golf, Mr. Dilly was not listed on that. It was not approved for him to go, and it's not an expectation for him to go. He chose to go. My understanding is this was a very similar situation as last year, and that those expenses were approved, but with the caveat of there's a proper process to go through. Any staff that travels to conferences, those conferences come before the board for us to review and approve. We have denied teachers who have attended conferences on their own because they did not go through the process of bringing it to the board, getting approval, doing a PO, and getting signed up. We have flat out told them, I'm really sorry you chose to sign up for this conference. It was not board approved. We will not reimburse. The other questions, and I'm just going through them and then you can try and answer all of them at one point, is why are we traveling out of state to scout teams to play? There is so much technology. Why can we not pick up the phone and have this conversation? At one point, the Higley football team was looking to go to Hawaii. Was there a trip to Hawaii for scouting? We never did go to Colorado. Was there a trip to Seattle for scouting? Not to mention, that trip came on the back of the Florida trip. So we were being asked to pay for airfare from Florida to Colorado versus even coming from Arizona during that time. So those are my concerns, and there's no documentation of who they met with in Colorado to talk about playing. We never did go to Colorado. What was the purpose, and why would we need to go and scout when we could call and we can talk to them? There's technology. We all know we're in the world of virtual, but virtual is not new. And same with conferences. Why would that process be any different? And when it's repeated, when this happened last year, it was approved, they were paid, but I have been told that the conversation was, you need to follow the proper process.
Vice President Reese, I do hear your concerns, and I really do appreciate your feedback. I want you to know that the matter, when it was brought to my attention, that I've been addressing it internally. And so, because of the personnel-related nature, I can't speak Beyond that, I am communicating a clear picture of our practices and guidelines, as well as putting them in writing, and so that there's no misunderstanding in the future.
But if it was 2018 and 2019, or 2019, 2018, 2019, why is it repeated 2019, 2020? And these policies and practices aren't new. I mean, I guess I'm concerned that we have people who are making this choice to do this when our policies, practices, they're very clear, and that if it was addressed a year ago, why are we faced with this again? And I'm not asking for personnel information, and I get that that's very sensitive, and I'm not asking that. I'm asking, if it was addressed, why are we being asked to pay for it again?
Yeah, really, all I can say is I'm addressing the matter and addressing it internally and putting everything in writing and following a process that I know HR has worked with me closely on.
President
Mrs.
Kaler,
Wilson?
members of the board, I would like to address something quickly, is that I was not comfortable with the request. We had a request come in to pay these particular costs. And as superintendent, with what's happening with the Auditor General and the Attorney General across the state with other things, I was not comfortable doing an approval from the superintendent without it bringing to the board. The process is that we do come to the board to ask for a request for out-of-state travel and out-of-state costs. That is the reason why I did ask Dr. Fowler to make sure it comes to the board so we stay within the general guidelines and respect of the Auditor General and the Attorney General because of everything that's happening across the state of Arizona. So it was my choice and my reasoning to bring it to the board and have the board vote on it like we would for an out-of-state travel.
Mr. Glover?
Well, I mean, I'll vote to reimburse. I'm not going to penalize somebody who expended all that money. But, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, we have leaders and we have our strategic plan and we have processes, and leaders have to set examples. So, you guys are the boss of the employees. My conversation, I think, would be, this is the first and last time that's going to happen. And, I just, if you want my opinion as a board member, if this happens again to the same person, I would be less inclined to vote for reimbursement. Okay, so
Mr.
we
Glover,
have to follow.
that happened last year. This is the second time.
President Kaler?
Yes, Mr. Witovich, go ahead. We can hear you.
Go ahead, Mr. Witovich.
Mrs. President Kaler, I do have some concerns about this request. One, in reference to this process, which will not follow through, but not one time, but 3 times. As I look at this, one is a conference that happens every year, so there was plenty of time to get prior approval for this. And just in closing, I'm really not comfortable with this request, and I think this is going to be setting a negative precedent.
Thank you, Mr. Witovich. Mrs. Wilson?
I wish she was here so we could ask some questions about it. We normally, if there is a travel, they are normally here before us, so then we could ask. I know there's some concerns with COVID and that on why he might not be here, but for future reference on something like this that is so outside the box, I really wish that he would be here in the future, because we could then ask some questions about the travel, figuring it out if it was really necessary, etc. Dr. Fowler, I hope you agree with that. Going forward, I know COVID has thrown everybody a loop, and I hope we don't have to have this conversation with anyone else, being that this is the second time and 3 times within. It's a struggle for me, but I'll just leave it at that.
Is this, though, are you saying that this is the second time it's happened and the board was, I mean, am I forgetting? I was aware of this last year happening too? Okay.
It didn't come as a separate item to the board. it came as a reimbursement, but was in consent with different expenses. So the conversation was, my understanding, and again, is we're going to go ahead and put these through. There's a process to follow. We have procedures. And that's my understanding. I'm, again, not getting into personnel or any, whatever happened is that conversation of we're going to approve it this time, don't let it happen again, happened last year, is my understanding.
Well, okay, but it didn't happen amongst us publicly. So see, that does sway me a little bit.
No, it did
I hear.
happen. No, it did happen in consent,
Oh,
not as a separate
no,
discussion.
I understand.
But it was in consent, and there were discussions about it. Does that make sense?
All right. I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I wouldn't, I would just like to move forward. I hope that we do. And this is, like I said, this will be the last time that it happens.
I too agree with Mr. Witovich that if we go ahead and keep doing this, then we're setting ourselves up for future decisions that come before us after the fact. And we have a clear policy and procedure, so I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Witovich. Is there any other questions or concerns before we vote?
Well, yeah, I mean, we should all just take a big deep breath. I mean, we could do as you say and leave somebody on the hook who spent money and time for Higley. That's fine, and I understand that there was previous history, but we could also, I think I'm saying that I'm drawing a very large line in the sand now and moving forward from there. So just think about the repercussions. This is not an insignificant amount of money to a public school teacher or administrator.
And I can appreciate your stance, Mr. Glover, but the line was drawn last year, and it was very clear. So that's where I have a struggle, that it's a repeat, and that's where I'm struggling, because I, again, don't want to set this up for future people to think, well, if this person got away with it 2 years in a row, then I'm going to be able to. So that's kind of my concern on this. Anybody else wants to chime in?
President Kaler, there's, and I guess in different aspects, that as board president, I was asked multiple times for different situations on, should we bring this to the board? This policy wasn't followed, this and that. And as difficult as it was, following our policy, we are, as board members, responsible for ensuring we have policies and procedures and that they're followed. And then it's up to our leaders to make sure that those are followed, and then we have to hold them accountable. That there were teachers who had decided to go to conferences for professional development. And actually, I remember one specifically who went to Tucson for their national certification, and it wasn't pre-approved. It didn't come to the board. It was an after the fact, and we denied it, and we had to go back to the teacher and say, I'm really sorry. It was not approved travel. We can't cover your expenses. In the future, for things like this, put it forward to your administrator, let your administrator bring it forward, and hopefully we can get that approved. So I hear what you're saying. This is a large amount of money for any individual, and it doesn't sit well with me. But we do have policies and procedures in place, and we do have to have accountability. And that this is an administrator setting the example. And it's very concerning to me that it's repeated, and especially when this person is responsible for reviewing items that come to us for travel, for review. That's where my concern lies. And we've been talking about accountability and setting the example. And when we start deviating for anybody, and again, I hear you on the amount, when we start deviating for anybody in our practice and procedures and processes, then we set ourselves up for future problems. And I hear what you're saying is, well, now now this is the line in the sand. If we have someone else who brings stuff to us like this, who says, oh, well, that line in the sand wasn't drawn for me, that was for someone else who had already done it once. This is my first time. And from an HR perspective, when we start deviating from what we do and how we do it, we really open ourselves up for problems later. We have to be consistent. We haven't been consistent. We've talked about accountability with this board, and that's why I have such concerns about it.
Can we have legal counsel on this? Are we allowed to ask for legal counsel?
At this time, I believe Mrs. Good was asking us also to put this on the agenda, correct, Dr. Thomason?
That is correct. I did confer with her before it was put on, and she said this needs to go to the board for approval. And I feel appropriately the same way, especially with everything going on in the state of Arizona with the Auditor General and the Attorney General for assignments for administrators and teachers for addendums.
So Dr. Thomason, I have a question for you. Last year, I remember there was some question, and I can't exactly tell you what it was because I'm not sure that I was on the board when this came before us. Was there a question if we can deny this? Because he did pay for a school function? Was there something, a caveat to that?
President Kaler, members of the board, it is coming to the board as a request to reimburse for his expenses for school-related expenses, and the board would have the ability to approve or deny the requests.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns?
Well, I mean, Dr. Fowler, Dr. Thomason, anything else you got? I just want to add, I feel like this is going a certain direction, and it could have a chilling effect, I mean, particularly on an employee. Anything else you guys want to add? I mean, you handled some, go ahead.
President Reese, Board Member Glover, President Kaler, and Board Member Wilson also. I know Board Member Wojtovich have also chimed in. I completely agree with all the comments that you've made in terms of what the process and the procedure are. Certainly, I'm clearly aware of the process and procedure, and I'm working to make sure that that's clear with all employees. And so, as Dr. Thompson said, this item has come because it's required. If we're going to reimburse on these, the board has to approve. I understand the reasons what you've expressed on either way. I'll continue to work with all employees and ensure that they follow the process and procedures. In an event when that doesn't occur, I'm going to continue to follow the progressive discipline, which I'm not going to go into that. But I can assure you, we're doing all we can within our control to make sure that those policies and procedures are followed in every case.
President Kaler. Dr. Fowler, can you help guide us on you've indicated you're trying to communicate these policies and procedures to all your staff and make sure it's clear, and can you help provide the board guidance on what would make it clearer than where it is, and how we can ensure, because we do want clear and concise messages, there's no doubt about it. And if we have policies out there and practices and standard procedures that we're doing that perhaps would not be clear, how can we make sure, if we're going to hold people accountable, how can we make sure that that is clear?
Well, I know there's a number of things that we do each year and especially with athletic directors, as in terms of our perspective, we meet monthly. Every meeting, the beginning, we talk about the financial aspect of pieces, and we talk about these items. So for me personally, what I'm going to include is more detail and specific reminders. I think part of the challenge is there's lots of items that our administrators are dealing with all the time, lots of things, and it doesn't mean that you can't, or that you don't follow the policies. It just means that there's lots of things going on, things happening. I do think that I agree that it's not necessarily a requirement that an administrator would travel on an event, but I think also on the other side, there's a lot of events where we do have administrators travel. And so I think the important thing is that if somebody wants to do those things, that they follow the processes that's laid out and get that approval. And so from our perspective, it's a constant reminding and refreshing and making sure people follow those processes. I know, even just going back to my own career, I mean, we went, and when I was teaching in Alberta, I was the coach / athletic director, but in 2 different years, we traveled with groups of close to 30 from Alberta, Canada to Florida, and competed in a tournament in basketball, and then in a different year to San Diego, and the same thing. And I do think the level of time and involvement in pulling off a trip like that is pretty intense, and all of the issues that could happen while you're there. I do think there are reasons to have an administrator there. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't follow the process and procedure, which it should. But I do think there is rationale for considering that. But I do think as a board, you should have that opportunity to consider that before as the policy's written. So I completely understand your perspective that it's a difficult situation, but I value your input and will respect your decision.
And I appreciate that information, and I get we've had more specific conversation regarding field trips, but I think there's a difference between want and need. And as you were talking, athletic directors may want to go, and I know it's newer that we've had the conversation of clarifying. If you want to go, absolutely, we want you to go and support your team. But if there's not a need for you to go, then you need to go on your own dime. If you want to go, you need to pay for your own cost. And if you need to go, then we need to know that that need is there. And I agree, to pull off some of these trips, it's not a bad idea to have an administrator there, because there's a lot going on and we're traveling. But I think that has to be very clearly outlined. And I think even with our new process, I think with our old discussion, I think that was pretty evident on what that process is. So I would, as you said, you meet monthly. We haven't seen these expenses from the other school. And I don't like to compare schools, but when I'm looking at, do we need to be doing this? Why is the need for one and not a need for another? That comes into play. But with your monthly meetings, I think now more than ever, with our new conversation regarding our field trips, that has to be a discussion. And I think that if our athletic directors are saying, yes, I really need to travel with this team, that based on our discussion, that their role, that they need to travel with the team, and that their role is very important for why they need to be there, and not meet up with the team later on, because if they need to be there, then they need to be there. So I think that that's great. You're meeting with them monthly, and I think that should be part of the conversation. But I just wanted to make sure of our current policies and procedures and practices. If there was something we can do to make it clearer, then I want to make sure we're doing that.
No, again, I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
And for both of you guys, you would have been aware that he went on these trips, correct?
President Kaler, members of the board, I was aware of one of the trips that, that he went on. I was not aware of the other two.
I concur with Dr. Thomason. It's the same, yes. Now, it doesn't mean that all 3 trips, if they were brought to us, that we wouldn't have considered it as a possibility, but it's just the fact that it happened, and that's why we're bringing it here.
Well, that really did change things. But so I feel like, though, in the time that this was on the consent agenda, in between that time, we did spend a lot of time talking about field trips and clarifying a policy that we would all agree was pretty muddy, right? And so, and I did listen to what you said, Vice President Reese, you know, and I don't think anyone the first 2 years said procedures and policies more than I did. But, you know, at the same time, I also recognize, you know, there's times to make an exception to the rule, and for this one time, I would be inclined to do that. You know, I think just that having this conversation is probably making the point that I think we want to make, and I think that denying this will probably have a much greater effect than the, you know, the modest amount of reimbursement. And I do trust that you guys have made things clear to your administrators, and will continue to do so, so that this doesn't come up again. But it's a lot of money. I would like us to take a breath and think about it.
Just a couple thoughts. The Florida trip was a golf team trip, correct?
That is correct, yes.
But Colorado and Washington, D.C., Mr. Dilly was by himself, correct?
That is correct. Washington, D.C. was the national...
AIA.
I'm sorry, was it? No, I'm sorry.
It's the National Athletic Directors
That's
Convention.
correct. Yes.
And Colorado was just scouting football, correct, by himself?
Yes.
So these were not needs as far as traveling with a team, except for the Florida trip, correct?
Right, like all proposed travel that should have come to the board first.
Okay, just I wanted that clarification. Mrs. Wilson?
Thank you. Is there a reason that we don't know why he didn't follow the procedures? Did he think that it was approved by us? Was this an oversight in his part? Can you answer that for me, or are you not allowed? I don't know what the legal law here is. Like, I don't know what, like, did he think he was approved? And because on the sheets it says that he thinks he was approved in a certain date. I'm reading it. It's very clear in our board docs that is he thought he was approved. Did he think he was approved?
I can speak to Florida. The other 2, I'm not sure. I mean, actually, so 2 of the 3, let me answer. Number 1, Florida was an approved trip, and so I think it was a misunderstanding that you're not on the list. Florida, their team is approved, but you weren't approved on Florida. So I've had that conversation. The national conference is, well, I've gone in previous years. In fact, well, you know, we had the national conference here a couple years ago, but that's typically something that I've submitted and put other people with, and so that there's a submission.
So he thought maybe you submitted it for
the
national conference, and he thought the other one, the Florida trip, was submitted with his name on it as well.
The Florida trip was approved, just assuming that he would get to go because the trip's approved. Right.
So the only, okay, thank you. Okay.
So the only one that...
That actually helps me a little bit clarify in my mind. Thank you.
Yes, hopefully I didn't say anything else.
Do we have the numbers handy of the total of the Florida trip alone separately?
I'm sorry, I don't have that. Oh, it's, if we could slide it down, I could see it.
Oh, sorry.
$608.78, I believe, for just the Florida trip. It's under issue.
$608.78.
Yes. Can we separate them out individually?
I would like to amend my motion. I move that the governing board approves the reimbursement of $608.78 for out-of-state travel expenses for Mr. Aaron Dilly.
Second.
Do you second President Kaler's amended motion?
You guys are looking, I mean, I'll second it. I may vote differently, but I'll second it.
I just feel more inclined because I know this trip was definitely a team trip that probably was under the impression that he was approved to go on it. So that's just my feeling right now. I'm the other two, I'm more inclined not to approve, but I am thinking that having that athletic director with a team is easier for me to swallow at this point, being that it was, several months ago, all these trips were taken.
Does this make bias for the other two trips if we approve this one?
President Kaler, members of the board can amend the request any way they feel is appropriate. But what I would say is the AIAA National Conference is something that is regularly attended by most athletic directors at schools. I just want to put that part in.
But was it under my understanding that Mr. Dilly registered for that convention at the convention site, or did he register early and plan to go?
I have no knowledge of that.
I think Mrs. Darlene Reach had that information. So he registered at the site and not prior. Does that cost more money to register at the site than going early? Okay, thank you.
So back to my question, does this make bias? If we approve the 608-78, can we not go back later and approve the other two, is my question. We cannot, because we've amended it. Is that how that works?
So what would end up happening is we have an amended motion for the approval of the 608. So what we'll do is we would vote on the 608. Then we go back to the initial motion and we vote on that as well.
Thank you
If
for
that
the
makes sense.
Yes, 100%. I just want to know exactly how I'm voting, so there is no question in my mind how I vote. So I just want to make it very
Kind of
clear.
technically we have
So we will
to-
double vote on that 608, correct? Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting on, because I want to do the community what I'm supposed to.
Okay, so we are going to vote on my amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Yay.
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wotovich?
No.
No. Motion fails. 2-3. So now I'm going to go back to the original motion for the expenditures of $2,229.01 for out-of-state travel expenses for Mr. Dilly. Any more comments or questions before we have a vote on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
No.
Motion fails 1-4. Okay, thank you. Moving on to 6.6. And that is I make a motion that the governing board approve the issuance of classified work agreements with the step increase for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
Any questions or concerns on this step increase? The step movement reflects an average increase of 3.4% for our classified non-exempt employees. And I know, again, Mrs. Martin's been working hard on all these changes in our fee, I call them fee schedules, it's not a fee schedule, our salary schedules. So we appreciate your time on this. Do you have anything you'd like to add for us?
President Kaler, members of the board, just to say that I appreciate your support in the whole classification and compensation project that we've been doing the last year, a little over a year, and our new schedule for our classified, although still a little bit less than some of our surrounding larger districts where they're financially funded a little differently, is still leaps and bounds compared to what we had before. And I think the concept of that average of that 3.4% is huge, considering from my knowledge, the classified haven't received an increase to that size in quite a while. And like I said, it's an average, but the step and the continued step for those individuals, if they stay with us, is only going to progressively get better for them when they keep their tenure with Higley. So thank you for your support as a board.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
President Kaler?
Yes, Mrs. Reese.
It's just worth repeating one more time. That is an average. So some will get more, some will get less. But anyone who hears this or just peruses and says, hey, you know, we're supposed to get a 3.4% increase. That's an average. Some will get more, some will get less. So just, it's worth repeating.
And I think the classified employees that I have talked to are so excited for just any little step. So that's the feedback that I've heard from many of our employees. And so I don't think that we're going to have the issue, but it is worth repeating that it's not a 3.4% all across the board. So thank you.
Absolutely. And the fact, too, that I've communicated with the help of members of the Human Resources team is that in the course of a one-year calendar period, the classified individuals have received increases, although, you know, they varied depending on the number and where they're at in the bigger picture. They've seen 3 different increases between July 1, January 1, and now July 1 again. Pardon me.
Great.
And President
Yes,
Kaler.
Mr.
So
Glover.
these, when do these start going out? I feel like I knew that a moment ago, and then I don't see it on here. Or,
Absolutely, Mr. Glover. You know, obviously with the status of our nation right now, we had hoped to bring this to you in what we had thought was going to be an earlier board meeting in April, but that meeting got canceled. So we're on a short time frame, but these work agreements will be distributed next week, May 5th.
Great. So all those in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. I heard you, Mr. Witovich. Thank you. I hear your voice, yes. I hear him in a box. All right. Now on to 6.7. And, sorry, I just lost my page. So I make a motion that the governing board approves United Healthcare, iVision Care, Total Dental Administrators, OCHS Inc., Sun Life Financial, Optum Trustmark, and Allstate for award for RFP number 19-06-24.
A second.
Any questions or concerns?
if I may. This is
Dr. Glover.
I actually just want to make a joke. I just realized as I'm sitting here how smart Darlene is. I knew that anyway, but she always gives us a bottle of water. So right about, how many hours, what are we, 2 hours in? Like, let this meeting end. I see why you put this up there. So, but no, if there's anything you want to add, Ms. Martins, about the process or
I
anything.
know that this is such a gift to our employees that our medical did not go up this year, and I hope that we are reiterating that to everyone loud and clear that we were able to do that for our employees this year, just our employees.
Absolutely, President Kaler, members of the board. Again, had we had our meeting in earlier April, you would have seen this RFP proposal, the formalization of accepting all of these contracts then in the bigger picture. Because as you may or may not recall, I believe it was the end of February in which I came to you and let you know what we were getting in terms of our renewals and where the insurance committee was going. So I'm thankful to the insurance committee. I'm thankful for the support of the board and the opportunity to look and going out for a new a broker. Hub International has been wonderful in working with us and has really made the process seamless in the bigger picture and really has negotiated hard for the numbers that we're seeing. So I think it's wonderful that out of all the contracts and the renewals we're going for, there is no increase. As Mr. Glover mentioned at that last meeting, that doesn't mean we're not stopping and looking at how we creatively look at the cost and how we look to implement some other things that hopefully can save cost in the future, whether it's plan designs, other components. But here in the big item, the only thing that was going up, as we mentioned before, was the vision, and it was minimal. It was cents on the dollar. So that's wonderful for our district, especially given the increases that we've had the last couple of years.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Martins. And this will be a 3-year contract with a 1-year renewal for the next 2 years, just to clarify that for all those listening. Okay, we're going to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Okay, items for future. We have, obviously, things are still in limbo as far as our meetings concerned, whether we will be like this again in in May, or have Mr. Witovich join us, maybe, I'm not sure. But we've got revised budget coming up, gifted and talented, technology update, how we prepare our students for life beyond, the athletic handbook review, and student athletic eligibility and clearance requirements. And I would just like to add, Dr. Fowler, when we do our athletic handbook, in case I'm not sure, I sent Dr. Thomason an email to make sure that we're going to include all the fees, the tax credit. I just kind of hold the whole finances of our sports as well in that, and try to encompass that with our athletic presentation. Thank you. Anything else?
President Kaler?
Yes.
Is there any plans, that statute's going in at Higley High, is that going to be coming up on our agenda soon? I think they were waiting, weren't they? Why are you
Dr.
smiling
Thomason,
at me?
will you please address that?
Yep. President Kaler, members of the board, right now I've asked everything to be put on hold. So earlier this year, I did request that the whole process be started over again. So because the proper paperwork and filings had not been done properly from the beginning, and so I went back to the group and said, right now everything is stopped, on hold. We need to start back from the very beginning and start everything over again. And so they do have some of the paperwork filled out. They have not completed everything as required. But when that is done, then we will move forward with what some of the issues with those requirements are. But at this time, because things had not been done properly from the beginning, I have stopped the whole thing and asked them that they start over on the process.
Any other future agenda items? Mr. Witovich, anything?
No.
Thank you. So I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
All right, I'm going to hang up, Greg. Bye-bye.
Aye. Aye.